Hello, I'm Jennifer Harline, Executive Director of French Heritage Society, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for the second program in our Meet the Owners series, which is putting the spotlight on some of French Heritage Society's grant recipients, and it also allows you to interact with them directly. These programs will provide critical support to our chapters to help them raise money to support the projects they've selected. Speaking of our chapters, did you know that we have 10 of them in the United States and one in Paris, and that each year they select the grant projects that they'll raise money for? Today's program will support our New York chapter, and I thank chapter chairs Odile de Chuter-Longchamp and Guy Robinson for leading the charge there. An important part of French Heritage Society's mission over the past 39 years is awarding preservation grants to culturally and historically significant French architecture in France and the United States. As we head into our 40th anniversary in 2022, we are so proud to have supported over 600 deserving projects. Today, we'll learn more about FHS grant recipient, the Domaine of Chavat Gardens, which is located in Podensac near Bordeaux. French Heritage Society is supporting the restoration of the Mystery of Life statuary, which was rather tragically vandalized in 2017. We're honored to have three representatives of Podensac with us here today. Jean-Marc Dupuit, first deputy to the mayor of Podensac, in charge of the restoration of the Domaine Chavat. Astrid Yaro, city council member in charge of heritage. And Warren Albertin, deputy to the mayor in charge of communications. FHS Deputy Director Karen Archer, who is part of our fabulous grants team with Isabelle Laroulière and Sarah DeLongson, is joining us from Paris to lead the conversation. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Your videos are currently disabled, but you are welcome to submit questions through the Q&A button along the bottom of your screen. I'll share them with the group following the conversation. At the end of the program, we'll give all of you the opportunity to turn your videos on and unmute yourselves so that you can ask questions directly should you wish to do so. And now I can't think of a better way to kick off this program than by being transported to the Domaine de Chavat through this short video.
Thank you. That was a beautiful introduction to the Domaine of Chavat. In this Meet the Owner series, the domain actually belongs to the city of Chavat, which explains why we have Jean-Marc with his wife Stephanie, who will be his interpreter this evening. This is really a Franco-American and bilingual program. So although I'll address some of the questions to Jean-Marc, his wife Stephanie, who speaks English very well, will respond. And then we have as well Warren and Astrid, and all of them are coming to us directly from the City Hall of Podensac. So welcome to everyone, and thank you very much for that wonderful introductory film. All three of you represent a different aspect of the management, promotion, and most recently, the restoration of the Domaine Chavat. Could you tell us a little bit about the history and explain the layout of the domain? Perhaps we can start with Astrid.
The Domaine Chavat is in Podensac. It's a little town near the Garonne River at 40 kilometers from Bordeaux, about 30 miles in the southwest of France. Alors, Podensac, it's a little city with only 3,200 inhabitants, but there are two famous characteristics. A water tower built by the famous architect Le Corbusier. And another characteristic, it's an aperitif, which is famous too. It's due to Ian Fleming in the novel called Casino Royale, The Lillet. It's this aperitif, it's an ingredient of the cocktail of James Bond. And the Lillet, you can see the picture behind us. The Lillet is a sort of sweet wine with orange liquor. It's delicious and it's produced here in Podensac.
Okay, I think we have the layout, and then the next slide.
Yeah.
You can explain, perhaps here you have a better illustration of the layout.
Yeah, it's perfect. The Domaine Chavat was built by François Thévenot, a rich industrialist from Bordeaux, who worked for the constructions of hydroelectric dams in the Pyrenees mountain. He booked the domain between 1916 and the construction ended at 1919. He surrounded himself with professionals like architects, and some artists like painters or sculptors.
And I could just point out too, we see where the little diamond is on the lower, in the middle of your screen at the bottom, is where the famous statue that we'll be speaking about, the Mystery of Life, is located.
Yeah. François Thévenot lived here with his wife and his daughter, and the family had some domestics too, who lived here with the family Thévenot. And he divorced and sold the domain in 1934. Then the Domaine Chavat was an old people home until 1999. There are 4 floors in the chateau with several styles. For example, a room with a Greek style, a room with a style like the French king Louis XIV, you know, and so on. Donc, it's difficult to explain the different styles.
Let's see, we have a couple of photos, maybe Ben, if you could pass the next 2 slides.
Yeah.
So we see a bit of the inside of the chateau.
Yeah. And outside the chateau, the architect used the same materials than for the dams, particularly the same stones. You can see it on this picture, on another pictures. I mean.
We'll see if we can see it there. The entrance to the park.
Yeah. This park is 15 acres with 40 sculptures in marble or bronze with some wild trees. Sequoia, for example, came from USA by boat, and an Osage orange. It's a curious tree with the fruit looks like tennis ball. It's extraordinary tree. And this park is a combination of two gardens. A French garden with straight line, green grass, tennis court, and an English garden, more poetic, more wild, more mystic or spiritual, and so romantic, with a little river and a little lake in front of the chateau. So a park with so many statues, it's unique in the southwest of France.
And as we look at this, you have to remember that this is all in a town of only 3,200 people. So it's quite impressive. Jean-Marc, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the genesis and the signification of the sculpture, The Mystery of Life.
Yes, of course.
We have his interpreter, Stephanie.
This statue was made by an Italian sculptor whose name is Ernesto Gazzeri. This man was born in 1866 in the town of Modena in Italy, and he opened his first studio 30 years later in Rome. This artist sold his statue everywhere in the world, and thus he went several times in the United States to deliver statues. He worked on various themes and created plenty of busts, public but also funerary monuments. For the Domaine of Chavat in Podensac, Ernesto Gazzeri sculpted about 40 statues, which were ordered by the owner, François Thévenot, to embellish the lawns, the alleys of the park, and the French garden. François Thévenot wanted to live with beautiful antique statues around his chateau. That's why he chose to order copies from Greek sculptures. In the park, you can also find an original creation from Gadzeri, The Mystery of Life, which is the most important statue of all, and which is also the major work of art of Gadzeri. This piece is a monumental group made of Carrara marble.
Perhaps we'll go to the next slide, Ben, so that we can see the statue. There we go.
And this statue, sculpted in Gadzeri's studio in Rome, was placed in the park in April 1919, and the artist himself came in Podensac to supervise the installation in the park. And he stayed 6 months here in our town. The Mystery of Life figures showing the different stages of life from newborn to old man. They are gathered in a semicircle around a spring, symbolizing the origin of life. There are two different parts in this sculpted group. On the right, you can see 12 statues representing the successive stages of human life. They are treated on a historical and naturalistic level. And on the left, you can see 6 other characters reflecting the philosophical and social reflection about the meaning of life, which at least remains impenetrable. All the figures are individualized, shown in movement, and Gadzeri paid attention to the precision of naturalistic details. If you agree, I will now read for you a text written by Gadzeri himself. It's a translation from Italian to French and then from French to English. So I hope everything is okay and correct. And if not, Mr. Gadzeri up there, please, I beg your pardon. So this is how Gadzeri himself described his characters in 1919. In the middle, an eternal spring symbolizes the source of life. Various animals come out of it, and around it are grouped different people, each one enjoying life according to their age and intelligence. The mother, seated near the source, holds in her bosom the unconscious new being. Nearby, there are the children who rejoice, observe, and destroy. The teenager, who for the first time thinks of the great mystery, the mystery of life, asks the reason to the old woman who always knew how to answer his question, but who this time cannot tell him anything. Near the young girl who lives in her dream arises the age of love quivering. The young erudite who believes he can know and explain everything contrasts with the old scientist who, in spite of his knowledge added to his long experience, finds the mystery always more impenetrable. Next to the fatalist, who with bent legs and patience accepts fate, aware that the human mind will not be able to unveil it, is the ignorant, robust, and stupid, who does not even think about how and why he lives. In the background, the ascetes walk away, resigned, satiated with myth and faith.
Very nice. So you have a beautiful example. This is obviously after restoration. If we could move to the next slide. And this actually is after the vandalization. And perhaps, Warren, you could tell us what happened, how the statue was vandalized, and what was the extent of the damage.
Sure. In fact, it was vandalized 4 years ago. It was the 8th of May 2017. In fact, the 8th of May is a day off in France because it is Victory Day. So this day, very late in the afternoon, Jean-Marc was informed that a sculpted bench has been damaged at Domaine of Chavat. He went there to Domaine of Chavat and he called Coralie, a sculptor, to come as well to perform a quick evaluation of the damages. The park was closed for the night when Jean-Marc and Coralie entered the park. But when they entered the park, they heard loud noises and they immediately understood that the vandals were still operating in the closed park. And in fact, there were 3 young people that were using a hammer to behead the statues. Obviously, these young people, they flew as soon as they saw Jean-Marc and Coralie, but Jean-Marc was able to catch one of the kids. And for the record, Jean-Marc tied the kid he caught to the gate of the park, waiting for the police to arrive. So Jean-Marc is a kind of hero there, you know, in Podensac. And the 2 other vandals escaped at the time, but they were arrested very soon afterward by the police. Anyway, the extent of the damage was terrible. Among the 18 statues, 7 had been beheaded. Some had broken nose, ripped members like missing hands, missing legs, missing fingers, and so on. And probably the most horrifying of all was that it was 3 kids from Podensac that vandalized our statues, meaning our collective heritage.
And here we have a very good example. You can see the red arrows depict the damage that happened during on the May 8th. You see the number of statues that were decapitated, and there was previous damage, and of course it needed cleaning. So this was quite a devastating sight when the residents discovered it the next day. So perhaps we can go to the next slide and you'll see several images depicting the damage.
Yeah.
And just as a question, were most of the pieces that were broken, the heads, the limbs, were they still in place? Were they still on the ground? Were you able to recuperate them?
Well, in fact, this is an additional question.
Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking aloud. Well, in fact, you know, Jean-Marc, when he arrived in the Parc Chavat, he saw one of the vandals, one of the kids, was trying to hide some pieces, some marble head. He was trying to hide the marble heads in the pond close to the sculpture. So we had to find out and to try to recover most of the marble pieces, because they not only vandalize the statues, but they also hide the different pieces of marble they brought this day.
Ah, okay. So that was quite. So we'll go to the next slide. Could you tell us a little bit about the cost of the restoration, what that represented for the town of Podensac, which, as we've seen, is a quite small town? Perhaps Jean-Marc, through his interpreter, could let us know about that.
Yes, the Mystery of Life is a piece of art which was estimated at 700,000 euros, which means $850,000. And we had to pay 85,000 euros for the restoration, approx $100,000, and 40,000 euros more for the cleaning of the statue and some more other restoration from earlier degradations. It means approx $50,000. 120 euros, so $150. It's so high a budget for a little town like Podensac, because the annual budget of the town is only 2 million euros. That's $2,400,000. But we really had to make this financial effort because our patrimony is so important for us.
So that was $150,000 in all with the damage. Jean-Marc, could you tell us about the restoration work and the process that involved?
For this restoration, we hired Coralie Quincé. This woman is a local sculptor who is used to maintain the statues of the park. Coralie is an artist who makes beautiful sculptures in an abstract or figurative style. Her work is of really great quality. And this time she had to give life back to the Mystery of Life, which was all the more important for her as she saw how it was damaged since she was in the park with Jean-Marc when the vandalism occurred. So first she needed to clean the sculpted group to restore its original beauty. And then Coralie began to work on the broken heads and noses. She had to use old pictures that were found in Gadzeri's studio in Rome. And she first made a model with modeling clay and then another model in plaster. And then she could sculpt the marble and restore the sculpted group. And the restored pieces were at least attached to the bodies with metal rods. And it took approx 2 months for Coralie to complete this work.
Okay, so perhaps we could see the next slide and we'll get some, you'll see the whole process.
And you can see, for example, on this picture that the restoration here in France keeps quite visible the places where the statues has been broken. And in fact, it is mandatory in France to restore without necessarily hiding existing damages. And this is the difference between restoration and renovation. In fact, restoration is a process in which you return the work of art as much as possible to its original condition, while renovation is just a renewal project. And here, the statues were restored and not renovated. And the sculptor that worked here to restore the statue, so Coralie, works in close relationship with an organism called Socra. And Socra is now quite famous in France because Socra was responsible for the restoration of 12 statues from Notre-Dame de Paris. And these statues were removed for restoration just 4 days before the terrible fire. So in fact, Socra, beside restoration, saved the statues of Notre-Dame de Paris. Now, if I just come back to our Podensac statues, in fact, several marble pieces came off and went missing through the years, either due to time and aging or due to vandalism. And I have a story to tell regarding these marble pieces. A few years ago, our deputy in charge of school was called because the school staff had found a marble toe at the school. Well, in fact, when the school called, they say, we have a toe there at the school. So it was a bit strange, but finally, it understood that it was a marble toe, not a real human toe. Well, finally, we never knew how the toe came by the school, but we guess that probably a child found out the toe at the park, played with it and left it at the school. But since everybody here in Podensac knows Chavat statues, immediately the school staff recognized a marble piece that was then kept preciously for subsequent restoration. And and in fact, a major difficulty for statue restoration is to replace completely destroyed or missing parts, because in some cases we have completely parts that were missing. So in that case, the sculptor has to perform a great deal of research to find out photographs, drawings, description, or any other historical elements to know how to replace the missing parts. In our case, Coralie was able to use pictures and documents from Gadzeri's studio, which was, of course, great help. And another difficulty usually is to find out similar marble, meaning with similar quality, with similar color and similar texture. So here, Coralie used Carrara marble, which is the same marble that was used by Ernesto Gazzeri at the time.
Okay, so now we'll have a series, if we can have the next slide, Ben, and we'll just go through a certain number of slides so that you can see the noses have been replaced here, and you can see in some, next please. The child, you can see clearly where the head was attached to the shoulders. And as Warren explained, this is left intentionally. So we'll just continue to see some of the work, which is actually, when you see more photos, very poetic. This is the restorator, Coralie. Next. And here they're cleaning the statues. So you can see the heads are not yet attached. So it's before the restoration, but already the cleaning is very important. Next.
Yeah, this is very impressive because, you know, at the time with the cleaning, we discovered things that we never saw before. So it was really, really nice for us.
Next. So you see some of the details of the different groups. Next. Very nice details in the background of some of the foliage as well. Next. And here you see quite clearly where the head of the adolescent was attached. And the missing leg of the smaller child. Next. And just the beautiful positions and the emotion that comes through the marble is quite impressive. Next. And here you see very clearly the nose that was attached. So it's not a case of poor restoration, but actually to let you know what has been restored and what is part of the original sculpture and the damage that was actually done. So we'll go on to the next, we'll leave that statue. And here you see again along the beard where the head was reattached as well. And some very nice details of the sculpture work. Okay, and so we'll pause here for a moment so you can look at those images while we talk about the next question, which is, we know that many of the chateau owners, cities and towns throughout France are major actors in culture, having visitors, attracting tourism. And we know this is important for Podensac as well, which, as we saw, is quite a small town. So can you tell us how the park is used, what type of activities you have, and how that brings the community together? So maybe Astrid could speak to that. And then,
this usually this domain is visited by a family from Podensac, Bordeaux, or near from the Gironde. We organize several cultural events like play, the sort of a little piece of theater, music, jazz, and the fireworks for our National Day on July the 14th. There are more or less 1,000 people. And sometimes there are some sport activities like running, of course, yoga, gymnastic, or exceptionally judo because of the COVID. It's important for us to make this place great again, to tell as our President Macron. In fact, it's important for us to make this place feel good for people of Podensac and around. Our community is so proud of this park.
Yeah, and in fact, the park is very close to the kindergarten and very close to the elementary school of Podensac. So obviously, Parc Chavat is more or less just an extension of the school playgrounds. And many school activities take place on Parc Chavat. There are races, botanic activities, games, and so on. And for example, many school fairs and pageants take place in the park. I have personal, very fond memories of my own children dancing with their classroom within Château Chavat, or playing historical characters, or even making movies with their classroom in the park or in Château Chavat. More recently, we have several projects involving both the kids and also the elderly of Podensac that are being developed in the park. For example, we have a shared garden, which is now tended by the elderly from the retirement home and also by the school of Podensac. And this kind of community garden is located very close to the greenhouse of the chateau. The patch of land is lent for free by the town council because it's such a wonderful way to bring life back to these greenhouses. And we have another project to renew the Guardian's Cottage and to use it as an activity center for children during holidays. Our challenge is to be able at the same time to protect and restore the chateau and the park for future generations, but also obviously to allow it to be full of life and invested by the inhabitants. So in short, our challenge is to make of Domaine Chavat a lively heritage that everyone can enjoy.
Yes, and each family of Podensac came at least one time in the park, whether it's for a walk, a picnic, or a morning jogging, or even for yoga. And there are so many things you can do at Domaine Chavat. You can play in the large green areas. You can observe plants and animals. Indeed, we have beautiful trees, especially magnolia, whose flowers are so big, so beautiful, and which smells so good. And we have frogs too in the mini lake just in front of the Mystery of Life. And the kids really love to see the tadpoles becoming frogs. You can often see some squirrels. And with a drone, we discovered some wild ducks' nests in the rocks. You can also pick up some nuts, chestnuts, pine cones, wild strawberries in the spring, and sometimes mushrooms. There are some trees you can easily climb. There are some under the drooping branches of which lovers can hide. I can remember my son going there with his girlfriend. It's a place where people gather to chat in the shade of a bench when it's very hot in the summer. And in the park, we have also two skeleton lions. Maybe you could see them on the one slide before. And these two lions are one on the right and the other on the left of the stairs. And all the children of Podensac have a picture of themselves perched on one of these lions, which are copies of the ones you can see in the Basilica of Saint Peter in Rome. They are decorating the tomb of the Pope Clement the 13th. And so it's all the more unbelievable for us to see young men destroying our patrimony, as they really are used to interacting with it. But this park is also our eldest inhabitants' favorite place. Indeed, the château used to be a retirement home, which was moved in the end of the 1990s. And it was moved in a new building close to the park. And so the old people love to cross the road and come back in the park where they used to live. Something special from Podensac. When you are in the park, which is near the Garonne River, you can observe a special event that we call in French le Mascaré. It occurs during the spring and the fall when there are so strong tides that a big wave comes from the Atlantic Ocean, enters the river and passes just in front of the chateau. The wave becomes higher and higher as the river becomes narrow. And there are some people who surf on this wave. They are called Mascar riders because they ride on the Mascaré. And most of the inhabitants of Podensac gather in the park to see this very rare phenomenon that does exist only in 3 places in the world.
Oh.
And in the end, if you should visit our park on a Saturday afternoon, you would probably see a beautiful bride, because it's such a beautiful place that the just married people make the pictures of this special day there, most of the time under the magnolias, as we did, Jean-Marc and I, a few years ago. And to finish with, I would say that just like in the statue, The Mystery of Life, you can meet in the park not only all the stages of life, like little kids on the lions, teenagers under the trees, just married people, retired men and women, but also people meditating, and unfortunately, some stupid destroying people ignoring all about art.
But luckily that's been restored, so we'll see.
Luckily.
It sounds like a lovely place, and really a place that brings together the entire community, the entire city, as well as a number of tourists and other visitors. Let's go on to the next slide, please. And we're fortunate to have several members of our New York chapter and other friends of French Heritage Society with us today, who provided a grant of $10,000 to the gardens for the restoration of the statue. And they will be giving a benefit dinner in New York very soon on the 2nd of June. So could you tell us perhaps what the significance of that grant and the aid and support from American donors represents to you? Perhaps Astrid?
Well, it's absolutely extraordinary for us to receive so much generosity. You know, France and USA share a long history together. Our country are friends for a long time. The Statue of Liberty is a sign of it, of course. And in Podensac, there are some streets with American names like Minnesota Street, a winery called Château Minnesota, and President Wilson Street. It's due to the First World War. A detachment of soldiers of the city of Faribault in Minnesota went in Podensac to help French soldiers. And for the centenary of the end of this war, some people from Faribault was invited here in Podensac to celebrate together this event. And now we have some friends in Minnesota, but now we have another bond of friendship through the French Heritage Society. We are so happy, and we know we are so lucky to receive your gift to help our community for restoration of a symbol of Podensac. As tell you, Warren, otherwise it was inaccessible for us. It's a high budget to restore. So having American donors is very and deeply touching. There is another strong bond with you. This group, this statuary group, has a twin in California.
So perhaps Jean-Marc, you could tell us a bit about this other mystery of life in California?
Thank you so much. So much.
Yeah. So, as concerns the twin statue in California, this statue was ordered by a compatriot of yours named Hubert Eaton. He was the founder of the Forest Lawn Memorial in Glendale, California. And Eaton discovered the mystery of life in 1919 in Gadzeri's studio. And he immediately fell in love with it. And he wanted to buy it, no matter what it cost him. But François Thévenot, the owner of the Domaine Chavat, had seen it before. So Eaton failed, and the sculpted group was bought by François Thévenot. So Eaton ordered a copy of the Mystery of Life, which was placed in the Forest Lawn Memorial in 1928. And this second Mystery of Life is quite similar to the one in Podensac. There are just a few differences.
Maybe we can just, excuse me to interrupt, if we could have, there we go, the next slide so we can see what you're speaking about.
Okay, and just a few differences. The vegetal sculpted elements are not the same. And the leaf, which covers the sex of the child in Podensac, we have a doubt.
Which is which?
Something, because the leaf which covers the sex of the child in Podensac disappeared in Glendale. So on your slide, it's not good.
It's the opposite.
It's Podensac, and without the leaf, it's in Glendale. And the sculpted group in California is also a bit smaller, and the characters are not exactly in the same place. So Gadzeri made also 5 other statues for the Forest Lawn Memorial. Nearer from you is one of the statues placed on the front wall of the public library in New York.
So next slide, please. And there we see it.
Okay. And
so for our friends in New York, they can actually go see this sculpture.
Mm-hmm. And lots of Gadzeri's sculptures are found in auctions in the USA. Jean-Marc has been collecting for 10 years documents on the works of Gadzeri everywhere in the world. That's why we know this statue is just near from you in New York, and he collects these documents in order to write a book about this Italian sculpture. So as you can see, we definitely have a deep bond with the USA. That's why we're looking forward to see you in Podensac to guide you through our small but beautiful town and our region too, to exchange about our patrimony and heritage, and obviously to share a glass or maybe two of wine or Lillet.
And just we have one
Thank you
last
so much.
image of Jean-Marc's book. And then thank you so much to all of you as well. And I'm sure all of our friends will appreciate your effort to speak English with us tonight on a subject that you know very well, to share your love and knowledge with us tonight on that, or today for you in the US.